Recording in progress.
Good afternoon. It is now 3 p.m. I'd like to call the Strategic Planning Ad Hoc Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, you take the roll, please.
Livingston,
Here.
Mackey,
Here.
Newton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Would like to reflect that Councilwoman Newton is joining us virtually today, but did notify me in advance. And then also would like to acknowledge some of our other council members that are joining us this afternoon. Councilwoman Gretchen Barron, Vice Chair Pugh, and Councilwoman Allison Terratio. Thank you. Am I missing anybody else online, Ms. Carrillo? Just Ms. Newton? All right, next item is item number 2, approval of minutes from our March 12, 2024 meeting.
So move, Madam Chair.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Here.
Mackey,
Here? Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next is the adoption of the agenda. Do we have any changes or deletions from staff?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
Move, Madam Chair.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes?
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. First item is item 4A, the strategic plan performance measures. ACA Thomas, will you be handling this item?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to sort of remind everyone that our strategic dashboards have been out on the website now since April the 23rd. And our next update to those, that document will be done during the month of July with a presentation for council to be available in the August timeframe. We're also on July the 1st going to begin tracking our traffic on that site through Google Analytics, and we will be able to actually see how many citizens are actually visiting the website and to make changes to that to be able to encourage more participation.
Question about
Thank
that.
you. You're recognized, Ms. Livingston.
Is there a way we can get citizens to give us feedback as they look at it or whatever? I mean, is it, what I mean by feedback is not what's on it, but easy accessible, what they're doing, whatever, just it helpful or whatever, just be nice if there's a way to get some feedback from them.
I can't answer that directly at this point, but I will look into that as an option.
Thank you. And just as a reminder to everyone, this item on our agenda is stated the strategic plan performance measures, and that's also what it's labeled on our website, but we do refer to it as our dashboard, which is that online tool that tracks all of the goals in our strategic plan and initiatives that we all voted on as a body, and has transparency or creates transparency for the public to see where we are as we move through each of those goals. So just want everybody to know they're not different things. The dashboard and the strategic plan performance measures are the same thing, and we will refer to them interchangeably. Any questions regarding the dashboard update and next steps? All right. Recognize A.C. Thomas for 4B, website update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If it pleases the Chair, I'd like to recognize Director Dale Welch to discuss the website update.
Yes, you recognize Director Welch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick recap, the website RFP was posted on March 6th. It closed on April 11th. And we got 36 vendor proposals, which is crazy, but it was great at the same time. But what it did was work a 9-member committee tirelessly to get them all evaluated by May 30th. We narrowed what they did. They narrowed down the list to 6, the top 6. Already begun vendor proposals. We've had our first vendor presentation yesterday, and the other 5 will be done before the end of the month. So everything's on schedule, thanks to the tireless work of the committee.
Thank you. Director Welch, can you give us an estimated time frame of when you think recommendation will come before either this committee or A&F?
Yes, ma'am, sometime in July.
Okay.
I will tell you that, because we're highly motivated to get work started, to get a vendor selected and get going, because we do have some deadlines that we really need to meet as far as implementation. The idea is that we're ready to get kicked off with implementation in August, and we need to be completed before August of 2025.
That is great news, Director Welch. We're always happy to hear things moving along with a good plan. So thank you for that update. I'll open it up for any council members that have any questions regarding the website update. All right, hearing none. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
A.C. Thomas, anything else before we move to the next item?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next is item 4C, which is the public-private partnership roadmap. And we will have Mr. Ray Jones leading this discussion. Before he begins, just want to serve as a reminder to everyone related to the public-private partnership that this item is a goal that is a part of our overall strategic plan that council approved. And the goal came out of the economic development study that was done in a report with recommendations on how we can grow to improve economic development and workforce and job creation and all those things within Richland County. So this public-private partnership discussion is another item that is a part of our strategic plan and is also something that's tracking on the dashboard, and we want to make sure we continue to move this item along as well to meet that goal that's stated. So, Mr. Jones, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you all hear me okay? Great. We've got a presentation that we'll have up just for folks to be able to take a look at. I'll go ahead and tell you in advance that this is very much a forward-looking presentation for the most part. There's been a lot of conversation since we last convened about how to get us to the very point that Chairwoman Mackey was talking about, which is to get to the point where we've got the P3 convened and we have the P3 working on behalf of the county. I do think it's important as we go forward just to take a quick look back. So I'm going to go to that next slide, which is just our agenda for the day. We'll do a quick review before we head off into really what's new. And there's going to be several items, some of which you all have seen before, some of which are completely new. And one of those will be an overall timeline, which will show you a launch and operational timeline for the P3. P3 menu is something we've talked about before, but we just wanted to have it all distilled in one place for you to take a look at. P3 Advisory Group is a new concept that we've discussed that we're excited about, and we'll talk about how that plays into this overall process. And finally, the one thing I know you all know and love is a good roadmap. So we now have a P3 roadmap in addition to other roadmaps you might be looking at from time to time, which we'll take a look at. We wanted to also run back through a few of the control-related questions that have come up before and just some ideas on how to deal with those. And then finally, as we sort of take a look forward, we'll end with the roadmap. So if we can go to that next slide. Many of you know that we have been working on this as a group since December of 2022. And even before that, council was considering the importance of economic development within its strategic planning process. As you all know, you had a study performed. That study was delivered to you, and the P3 is not only part of your strategic plan, but was also a recommendation made by a consultant that was hired by the county. And so here we are, we're almost 18 months in and trying to get to a point where the P3 can be launched at the end of this year. We'll go to the next slide. This is a high-level timeline. So we're in the middle now of having this committee look very deeply and closely at items that relate to the P3. The hope is over the next several months that the P3 Advisory Group, which is something we're going to talk about in just a minute, along with this committee and council, will be able to work through some of the finer points of the P3, many of which we have discussed in various meetings over the last several months. We'd like to get to the point where we can actually go to county council after having given county council updates, regular updates, actually go to the council with a structure to be approved, which would include things like what's the name of the P3, how will its board function, some of the big details that we've been discussing. We'd like to put some deadlines on now because the November approval is very important because we're looking at a December launch for the P3 and a launch. That term is something I'll leave for other professionals to describe, but it's the time where we stand up to P3 and we let the public and the business community know what the purpose of the P3 is and how it's going to be assisting the citizens of Richland County. So end of the year is sort of the launch of the P3 to stand it up, but the operating launch, if you will, of the P3 is scheduled for the beginning of next fiscal year, July 1 of 2025. And that's important because, as we know, there are a lot of details to be sorted out about how the P3 will function and operate. And we'd like to have a working P3 board. We'd like to have the council input, and we'd like to be working on that on the latter half of this fiscal year. Of course, we'll need the P3 addressed in the county budget, so we'll need time to do that. And so all of that tracks nicely. So an end-of-year launch on the P3, but an operating launch or beginning of operations at the beginning of the next fiscal year. So that's our critical timeline. And now a couple of details. Let's go to the next slide. I just want to remind you that we spent a lot of time talking about what the P3 might do. We talked about staple items and specialty items, and we tried to make sure that the specialty items in particular were customized for our county, uniquely Richland, if you will. And so where we've landed are the items that are on the screen, and I'd like to highlight that several items that have been discussed by this committee have been incorporated and added to where we started, and those include some of the quality of life related items that the P3 would need to address, as well as transportation, childcare, are also issues that we think are uniquely Richland and would like to see our P3 work on. And so all those items are on the menu as has been discussed by this committee and ultimately to be approved by council. If we can go to the next slide, please. One of the things we've seen, and in some respects, we've taken some of the work that we've all done together, because as I look across the dais, each and every one of you has had a huge role in what's been going on with the penny. But one of the things that council suggested early on is that we have more citizens' input on the penny. And of course, we had an existing body to get that from, which was the Transportation Penny Advisory Committee. And that was an official committee that was formed by council, and council gave it a charge. And in this instance, we're looking to do something similar, perhaps not quite as formal. And so we're suggesting the formation of what we call the P3 Advisory Group. We're not calling it a commission or committee because we're not necessarily seeking for it to have sort of the same formality as some of those bodies do as they sit under council. And there's several reasons for that. First of all, we don't need it to have a life necessarily beyond working through P3 related items over the next several months. So it's going to have a limited duration, but we do think it's an important mechanism for citizen input. And when we say citizen input, we're talking about the business community and others. We're not talking about an overly large committee. We'd like it to be nimble, but we'd like to be able to put some of the things to it, some of the things that you all have been wrestling with, to see if we can get the input of a body and help us move forward. It would be advisory only. So in other words, it won't take binding votes. And it's something that we would plan to work with the chair of this committee and council and the staff to convene. So that is, we think, a very important element to this, to get citizens' input. If we can go to the next slide. Here's something that looks familiar to you. It's not nearly as busy as the penny roadmap, but it is a roadmap nonetheless. So Everything you see in green is council action, everything in orange is this committee, and everything in blue would be the new P3 advisory group. Obviously, we're here, June 18th, for those of you who don't know what day it is. So we're here.
Thank you.
We're here just checking. Well, I asked Emily on the way over here what day it was, and so I'm right there with you. So we're here, and we have the option of convening a work session as early as July 2nd. We put optional there because that's obviously something for you all to discuss. But we would like to get the P3 advisory group convened in August and sooner if possible, to start them along the path of discussing some critical items that we know this committee and council will want to hear input on. We have them meeting a couple of times before we come back to the next strategic planning ad hoc committee meeting planned for in September. And you'll see there's a pattern. We want to make sure they meet before you all meet so that reports can be made. We're not sure yet exactly what that's going to look like. In other words, we don't know whether there'll be a chair of the P3 advisory group or whether we'll have a member of staff there that will report to you. We haven't sorted that out yet because, again, we don't intend for it to have the same degree of formality as a committee or a commission might. But as you can see there are 10 some odd steps that would be taking among this committee, council, and the advisory group to get us to the point where we're ready for a launch. And then, of course, the first 6 months of next year would be spent on transition. So that's a roadmap for consideration by this committee. It's one that we have worked through with the chair and others to make sure that it would make some sense, and we think it does. And if I can just now land on the next slide, and just want to remind everybody that we are ever mindful of these spheres of control. So y'all have seen this before, but I just wanted to make sure that folks didn't think we had forgotten about it, how important it is that this council remains involved with its hands in the soil, if you will, on economic development. And you may recall that all of us working together identified 5 areas of importance in terms of council involvement. One, obviously, is the appointment of the board members. That remains a part of this conversation. Approval of all incentives would always come before council. Funding and budget are always a function of council. The way that the P3 operates would be, we believe, in accordance with a plan to be approved by council. And finally, there are ongoing conversations about how the economic development director and its employees will relate to the P3, and we think we'll have time to sort those questions out. We'd also like to get some input from the citizens group, the P3 advisory group. So to look at this a slightly different way, we've worked on a graphic to try to show you, and this is the next slide, that the council, which is at the top left, really has a tremendous amount of control over what happens at the P3. We think the greatest degree of control really comes from the budgetary exercise that the council will go through. I remind the group, and I don't think this will change, that the primary funding mechanism for the P3 will be from the county. It's anticipated that it will raise private dollars, but for the most part, we anticipate it will be county funding. And so this is intended to show you that much of what occurs, and as you see that big arrow on top, much of the critical elements of economic development will remain with this council. And it will rely on the P3 board for advice. And hopefully it will empower the P3 board to go address some of the items on the menu that we're not currently able to get to in our current configuration. And if we'll go to the next slide, and we'll just land on the roadmap, Madam Chair, and glad to now answer questions or be involved in discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. Appreciate this roadmap and our next steps to move forward in accomplishing this goal. Did want to open it up to my committee members first to see if they had any thoughts. Oh, Ms. Newton, you are recognized.
I wasn't trying to skip ahead of anyone there. I was just getting in the queue.
Okay, no, well, you are first up, but I did want to open up to committee members, and then we can open it up to other colleagues in attendance for any thoughts or feedback on the proposed roadmap or any other slides in the presentation today. You're recognized.
Thank you. So just want to understand a little bit more about some of the things that you outlined, Mr. Jones. So specifically, first, thank you for providing the roadmap and the timeline. It's very helpful to see what you have here. And so first, I just want to understand, number one, what is driving the timeline. And I don't want to say like as opposed to dilly-dallying, but you've got that. I think you said that you wanted it like set up by the end of this calendar year. So which is kind of in the middle of our fiscal year. So I'm just trying to understand if there's a particular thing that's driving this December launch versus the having it fully stood up later in July, if I could understand that time period a little better. And then my second question is about the advisory group, because I feel, and maybe I missed it before, so I'm learning more about that today. Who is envisioned broadly would be on that advisory group, and how they would be selected and given a charter, because for all intents and purposes, if you want that group to start in August, you basically have to get it together now. So I just wanted to know more about that. Thanks.
And Ms. Jones, I'm happy to take the first question, or if you want to, I don't want to step over you. Ms. Newton, as related to the end of the year P3 launch, it's one internally as we look at our strategic plan as a whole, and when we started this, right now over 2 years ago, and being able to set some timelines for us to actually start accomplishing some goals and tracking where we are with moving on goals. I did set a proposed timeline of the end of the year, and with the end of the year being a time frame where we have the kind of the meat in place of what it looks like, but then we do have the first part of the year to then work towards standing it up, but then also having everything that we need to submit in time for the next year's budget. Did that help answer the question?
Yes, thanks. And then in terms of what do you see happening between this December launch and the July thing? Is that just all of the administrivia that you see happening then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that was my first question. Then the other was about the advisory group.
So the advisory group, I think, is a recommendation as well, so we can engage companies, the outside private sector, and get feedback on what it is that we are looking to establish and get some of their buy-in and ideas. But it's not anything that's set in stone, as Ray said, not anything that is ongoing past December. It is just a working advisory group. And I believe we can look at some of the key business folks in the area and come up with a list and work with staff as well to give recommendations, and colleagues can give recommendations as well.
So then, is it safe to say that the idea of how that group is going to operate hasn't been fully fleshed out yet? Again, I'm just trying to get a specific picture in my mind. We're saying that this group is going to start in August, how many people, who's going to be on it, how it's going to operate.
Yes, so happy to hear feedback on the group and what it is that you would like to see as far as operations, but the meeting dates are before us. And they would be similar to what we do when we look at the penny. We have things that we would discuss in committee that we would get their feedback on. So we've talked thus far about menu staple items and what we would kind of look like moving forward. And I think we're getting their feedback on that as well.
Thanks.
All right, you're welcome. Trying to see, any other questions? Somebody else
Yeah,
said it?
just mine is,
Yes, sir, you're recognized for Livingston.
I'm real concerned about the work session in terms of what that looks like and what we're going to try to achieve there and that kind of thing. It's
The one on July 2nd?
We're going to do that second, yes, 'cause I think that's
Okay.
when we get started.
Mr. Jones, can you speak to, after today, if we were to move forward on July 2nd, what items you would envision at the first work session?
Sure, and we anticipated that maybe that we would need to talk about that, and that's why we put it as optional. But I think we would try to have an expanded version of the conversation we have now. So it would be, I think, helpful for the whole council to see the timeline, to see the roadmap. I think it would be helpful for council you all have been hearing about the P3, but We have not been before the whole council on the P3 in this way in some time. So I think there needs to be sort of a refresh, a reset of where we are, why we are, and how we're getting from point A to point B. So, and because there's so much that's been on council's agenda over the last several months, it just seemed like the appropriate thing to do to make sure everybody has the same baseline going forward.
Be optional.
Okay. So delete the
Optional from your
option.
perspective. Yeah, no, I
That being
understand.
said,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I didn't want to presume that y'all would hold it. I guess that's maybe the better, should have put presumptive for something, yeah.
Other than that, I think the timeline is very helpful.
Thoughts, Vice Chair Pugh or Councilman Barron, or questions?
Madam Chair, I do agree with Mr. Livingston. We need to make it optional. We need to make it mandatory because we'll find ourselves going back over it time and time again. But I definitely like the roadmap. It definitely is not convoluted like the penny roadmap is. And we are not going to participate in the August 6th and the September 10th
No, sir.
meetings, right?
Unless you want to, but no, sir,
Okay.
it was not intended.
All right. That's all I got, ma'am.
You recognize this, man?
Thank you. And of the roadmap as well. But yeah, I think that's.
I didn't know everybody liked these roadmaps
Yeah, I
so
like
much.
the roadmap.
Who knew?
I like the timeline. It's a timeline. It's a calendar. Come on,
Okay.
send me an alert. I'm here
Noted.
for it. So no, seriously, because it does kind of help us just kind of pinpoint where we're going and what your thoughts are. So just help remind me. I know this is a concept still, so it's still a concept that we're putting a lot of work into. That could very well go to full council, and they may not like it. I'm gonna be real frank, real frank, because the reason why I came here was because I remember, I'll say it a lot, but Chip Jackson said the work is done in the committee. And so I come to the committee so I can get the information. So that does concern me. So back to Mr. Livingston's point, the work session definitely doesn't need to be optional because this, even though it's a concept that we're investing a lot in right now, and it's just a handful of us here. I just wanted to say that. And then also with the advisory board, that would be something that I'm assuming that this committee would make a motion to take to full council to say, yes, we want an advisory. How are we going, because essentially what we're doing is we're putting an advisory board in place for a concept, but not necessarily for a program that we attend. You following? A tangible program. So I'm just trying to wonder, are we putting the cart before the horse, or how do we get both of them working in tandem? Because it appears to me they may be a little bit out of order.
Well, I do think, and this is perception, I guess, for many council members, but I would hope that for many of our colleagues, this is more than a concept because we've talked about it for over 2 years. We've spent 2 different strategic planning forums meeting with other P3s as a follow-up to our strategic plan that the full body voted and adopted. And so this P3 initiative is more than a concept. It is something that we put in our strategic plan that we all agree as a body we were going to move towards. We've met with other P3s throughout the state, evaluated those. We've had plenty of conversations. We've had the staple menus and options sent out to the full body for them to give feedback on what menus they want to see, whether it's a focus in workforce, a focus in childcare, transportation. And so there's been engagement along the way of what does it take, what does our unique P3 need to look like? And so I do feel that we are past the point of concept, and that at this point, if council members were not in agreement upon completing something in our strategic plan that we voted on, I would hope by now someone would have said it. So at this point, I'm looking at it as we all agree a P3 is where we want to go. The question is, what does our P3 look like? What does Richland County's P3 look like? Because we're different than Charleston or Greenville. And that's the piece where we as a body need to be on the same page of what does it look like. And so I definitely think the work session is needed, and I'm glad to hear you all agree that it shouldn't be optional. And hopefully we can get, folks to come and we move forward. And then the advisory group, I'm open to, hearing from Attorney Wright or moving forward of how we bring them together. But because it's not a long-standing group, this is almost like a focus group, really. It's almost like, okay, we've all given feedback. Let's put it in front of some experts that are in the business field and get their feedback. So it's almost like a focus group to say, let us know what you think. So by the time we do put it before full body and we're having votes on it, we can say, okay, yes, we talked to the business community. We've talked to other P3s. We've gathered all our research before getting here instead of going too far and having to go back. But, well, hold on just a minute, because I mentioned the attorney's name, so now I see him wanting to respond. You recognize Attorney Wright?
Yes, that was the one thing I was thinking about, is that it depends on how you want this advisory group set up, whether, because if you wanted to report to council, you would have to actually take a council action to set up the group and determine officially who's going to be a part and how they'll be chosen and all that. The other way is be like, for example, like you said, if it's a kind of a group where, say, the administrator or myself or, Mr. Jones or someone, kind of we meet and talk with them, and then we come back to council with kind of what was recommended, then that doesn't have to take council action. The other way would have to take council action and kind of create a formal group. So that's the only thing with that, and that takes council action.
Thank you. Vice Chair Pugh?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, is this the group that you were mentioning just a few minutes ago that we were engaged business owners and leaders in the community?
Yeah, advisory group, yeah.
Part of the advisory group?
Yeah,
Okay, all right, that's it.
yes.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
the idea that Mr. Wright proposed, I think, makes perfect sense. It is intended to be far less formal than, say, again, by analogy, the TPAC, which is coming and reporting directly to the committee and sometimes reporting to council and being charged by council. So I think if that would work, with input, obviously, from the committee and others about who needs to be on it, but the idea, I think you've hit it on the head. It's just a broad cross-section, large business owners, small business owners, right? Not just large business owners, but folks that can give us some input on what this might look like. And then we're glad to help set up meetings and then working with staff, bring the input back. That would be perfectly fine.
Ms. Newton? I just can't see you, so I'm making sure you didn't have your hand up. Are you okay?
Oh, no, I didn't have my hand up, but I guess if I'm recognized.
You are always recognized, Ms. Newton.
Didn't have a hand up, but
No, I mean, I wasn't looking for you, but, you came for me.
I did. Touche. You're recognized.
So I guess, so for me, I guess I just want to say I appreciate the way that you, Madam Chair, have kind of outlined the process that we've gone through at our strategic planning retreats in this committee. I guess I just want to go on record and say that it's certainly true that council has taken votes and we're all individual council members. So I actually still do have some concerns about the P3, and obviously we're still in the process of structuring it. So I can't fully express all of those because they're decisions that we are still in the process of trying to make. So I guess when I hear the things that council has done as a group, I hear it as things that the body has done by a majority. But I think that there are still questions that I won't say some of us have, I'll say, that I have, or concerns that I have that I've expressed, that I'm just, continuing to observe this process as it appears to be the will of the body to see how to contribute to it. But I don't think it would be accurate to portray me as unabashedly on the P3 train, I guess. I am but I'm at the station. I'm watching the train. So thanks.
We're glad you're here. Yes.
Just the last slide, and then we can at least close out my portion of it. So I just want to remind you all that we do need a name of the P3, and so as you have quiet moments and something interesting strikes you, we invite you to write those names down. I will tell you that just one little nugget for you to take away is we live in an area that's got a lot of overlapping geographic jurisdictions, and so when that happens, we've seen other areas, rather than claiming one part of the geography and leaving another part of the geography out, like the county and the city and vice versa, they've come up with names that maybe more recognize kind of the character of the community. And so we think that's an interesting concept to name our P3 in a way that doesn't necessarily tie directly to geography. There's ways to put taglines into a name to make sure people know where you're at, right? So I just encourage you all to maybe think outside the box on a name. And then, of course, subject to additional input from these folks, our next step is to convene the P3 advisory group, which if we're going to have the work session on July 2nd, then we can be talking about it, but maybe we need to get some buy-in and some input from council, and then we could be working on that for August. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any further discussion or comments regarding the P3 or next steps? You recognize, Ms. Barron.
So, Mr. Jones, not that you don't have enough to do, but, as I chair a couple of these committees, and we don't brainstorm well as a group. I'll just say that. We don't brainstorm well. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Bring you some names. We can bring you some names.
So I would like for you
Okay.
to bring us some names, because I've said it this dais and it was like pulling teeth. And I like Miss Mackey, and I want her to keep her hair and all the things. I'd be a better chair than me, but we're a hard group.
Understood.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Barron. Everybody else, feel free, if you have a name that hits you, late at night, you can share them. All of them are welcome. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Newton, you're recognized.
Thank you. I guess I was just wondering if we had also made this, as you look at names, made this invitation to staff as well. I appreciate that the 11 council members have an opportunity to share feedback, and Mr. Jones and his team, but I don't know what the process would be to invite that if we're welcome to it, but I think it would be good.
So I'm hearing you say we should allow staff to provide suggested names as well, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
if we're
I'm fine with that. I just
collecting
want to make sure I
feedback,
heard you
yeah.
right. Yep, I am fine with that. Mr. Livingston, as another committee member, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with anybody who wants to suggest a name.
Well, so he opened it up even more. All right. Mr. Jones? Okay. I think Mr. Jones is good with that, and staff, ACA Thomas and Attorney Wright, thank you. All right. Ms. Newton, your hand's still up. Was that carryover, or you had something else? Okay, great.
I think it was carried over.
That was carryover. All right. Mr. Ratio, any thoughts on the P3? Any questions at all?
Workshopping.
Okay, great. We'll see you at the workshop. All right, we are now at item 5.
Move for adjournment, Madam Chair.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.